Doggerland? No, it's not a country of dogs, as you probably first thought. It's a land the size of Great Britain in the north of Europe. But don't bother trying to find it on the map of the old continent. Your search will come back empty. Doggerland hasn't existed for thousands of years. But where was it exactly? And did humans live here? Scientists are doing their best to answer these questions. Let's start with the name. In the 1990s, a British archaeologist named the area Doggerland after Dogger Bank, a sandbank some 60 miles off the east coast of England. The word probably comes from Dutch. It was used for a fishing boat with 2 masts. Makes sense, since today, the North Sea is a rich fishing area. But thousands of years ago, people living here had a different diet. Some 12,000 years ago, the last major ice age was slowly reaching its end. Doggerland didn't feature seawater, but marshlands, lagoons, forests, and gently sloping hills. At that time, Britain and Ireland weren't islands. They sat deep inland. You could set off in Denmark and walk all the way to the north of Scotland. There was a system of rivers that emptied themselves in the North Sea. Back then, it was more of a channel that separated Doggerland from Norway. The rivers were different too. The Thames flowed into the Rhine. The ancient river they formed flowed into the place of today's English Channel and emptied itself into the Atlantic Ocean. Doggerland even featured a lake. There were some glaciers as well, but the land was still inhabitable. So who lived there? There were communities of hunter-gatherers from the Middle Stone Age. This was the time of human history when our ancestors mastered chipped stone tools. They used these stones with sharp edges for spears and arrowheads. This came in handy at Doggerland, which was the richest hunting area in all of Europe. It could have easily been the most populated region in the northwestern part of the continent. The hunters' prey likely consisted of reindeer, mammoths, oxen, wild pigs, brown bears, wolves, and many other species. In short, nobody went hungry here. Meat wasn't the only thing on the menu. Ancient residents of Doggerland collected hazelnuts and berries. They lived in wooden huts. They built them close to rivers, and they even constructed their settlements on hills. Remember Dogger Bank? It now sits underwater, but it used to be a mountainous region. Doggerland must have been prime real estate in prehistoric times. Its total surface area was over 18,000 miles, but things were about to go under, literally. The last ice age was ending. All the water trapped in glaciers and ice sheets started to melt. You experience this process firsthand every time you order a cold drink. Even if you drink it bottoms up, after a while, the glass is full again. Why? Because the ice cubes have melted. Think of Doggerland as that glass. The sea levels started rising quickly. Every century, the sea flooded from 3 to 6 feet of dry land. Just imagine what this would mean today. Miami's elevation is just over 6 feet. The city would be flooded in less than 100 years. But there was one event that speeded things up. The Storegga slides were a series of submarine landslides in the Norwegian Sea thousands of years ago. And what happens when huge chunks of Earth shift suddenly underwater? Gigantic waves. You probably know what a tsunami is. Doggerland was likely pounded by several of them. They were so powerful that researchers believe they washed away Great Britain's land bridge to the rest of the continent. All that was left of Doggerland was an island the size of Wales. Scientists estimate that the waves of this ancient tsunami were at least 40 feet high. Some 6,000 years ago, Doggerlanders were on the move. They were migrating to higher grounds, England and the Netherlands in their case. The ironic part is that when we literally translate the name of the country of Netherlands into English, we get lower lands. But thousands of years ago, this was higher ground for hunter-gatherers escaping the flood. Once it was all over, the continent of Europe got the shape we easily recognize today. But Doggerland was nowhere to be seen. It's been sitting under the waves of the North Sea for 8,200 years. Does the idea of Doggerland remind you of a more famous case of a submerged land? The lost city of Atlantis comes straight to mind. But there is an important difference. Atlantis is only a legend. Everything we know about it comes from the writings of the Greek philosopher Plato. Scientists have been searching for Atlantis for a long time. And, up to this day, they can't even agree where exactly it was. Theories range from the Mediterranean to even Antarctica. Doggerland is not a myth. Everything science knows about this lost land comes from hard evidence. In 1931, a fishing boat was doing its thing off the coast of Norfolk in England. At the time, the crew would drag a net along the sea floor, sweeping everything in its path. And they caught something more than fish. It was peat, like the stuff we find in Alaska and in Ireland. But what was it doing at the bottom of the North Sea? It didn't belong there, because seawater destroys peat. There was only one possible explanation. The area must have been dry land at some point in history. The final proof was that the peat contained a harpoon spear point, a sure sign of human activity. The idea wasn't new, though. Since the Middle Ages, there has been talk of submerged land with underwater forests. In 1913, a British geologist came forward with the idea of an undersea world in this part of Europe. Scientific evidence kept piling up. Local fishermen started pulling out human-made tools and animal bones. Researchers dated them to be around 9,000 years old. But the deep, murky waters of the North Sea made it impossible to send down divers. One archaeologist noted that they knew more about the surface of the moon than what lay at the bottom of this relatively shallow sea. The discovery of oil in the area in the 1960s was a real game changer. Companies from the industry provided seismic survey data to scientists. This helped them piece together the full image of what Doggerland used to look like. Computer models soon produced images of river valleys, coastlines, freshwater lakes, and hills. There are even footprints of nomadic tribes preserved on the sea floor. Today, marine biologists are using magnetic fields to map out this lost underwater world. But Doggerland isn't the only place on Earth that went under the waves. Beringia is another lost world of global importance. This used to be a land bridge between Asia and North America. It got its name from the Bering Strait. It is 53 miles wide at its narrowest point. But until the end of the last ice age, this was dry land that our human ancestors called home. Genetic evidence shows that Native Americans lived in Beringia for some 15,000 years. If you want to imagine what this land looked like, think of present-day Arctic Alaska. It was a shrub tundra. There were also small willows and birches. Sorry, no woolly mammoths. Large grazing animals simply wouldn't have had enough food in Beringia, though there were probably elk and bighorn sheep in the area. But the Ice Age wouldn't last forever. Like in Doggerland, sea levels started to rise. This happened some 13,000 years ago. It wasn't all bad news, though. Scientific evidence suggests that around this time, people started moving south. They left the slowly sinking Beringia and crossed over into Alaska. From there, they populated both Americas. These were the ancestors of Native American tribes.
Tartessos, a mysterious, highly developed society that once flourished and then, without any warning, suddenly disappeared. Moreover, before they were completely gone, they performed some strange rituals, as if they were trying to save themselves from something. But what happened to these people? Let's try to find out. Let's go to the southwest of Spain, to about 2,500 years ago. Once, there was a beautiful city here, a trade center of Tartessos. Imagine the temple in the middle of a deserted town. A breathtaking, monumental two-story building. There's a thick smell of frying meat in the air, and the smoke from its frying rises high into the sky, covering the patterns of the sanctuary. The sun has already set, and it's time to prepare for the ritual. We enter the ancient monumental hall. Inside, hundreds of people gather around a long wooden table lined with delicate ceramics and bronze bowls. They feast and drink. These people have much more fun than the animals outside the building. These animals are being prepared for the ritual. Horses, cows, pigs, donkeys, even dogs. All of them were brought here to appease the deities. And what happens after the ritual itself is even crazier. At the end of the ceremony, people take torches and set fire to the whole building. Everything turns to ashes and coals, and when the last embers fade away, they take shovels and begin to bury this place. It will take them at least several days to bury the former sanctuary under piles of earth. They work tirelessly. In some places, the thickness of the layers of mud and clay will reach almost 14 feet. And then these people, the last known Tartessians, just leave this place and disappear from our world forever. But what just happened? Why did they even do all this? Let's start from the beginning. Tartessos was first mentioned in Greek and Roman texts thousands of years ago, but for a long time, we had no idea what it even was. All the descriptions were contradictory and confusing. Some archaeologists thought that Tartessos was a kind of seaport. Others thought that it was a river or a water reservoir. They even said this place could be connected with the mystical Atlantis. But there was nothing to back it up with, so the scientific community quickly rejected this idea. But today, we know the truth. Tartessos was an ancient civilization. It's been located on the Iberian Peninsula, one of the southernmost islands of Europe. It flourished in the 9th to 5th centuries BC, and then, around 2,500 years ago, suddenly disappeared. They were quite rich. The island had rich reserves of metal, so their economy was thriving. Silver, copper, lead, and other good things were mined in the local Sierra Morena Mountains. Almost all the locals were engaged in trade. For them, it was a common thing. Isn't that strange that there were so few records left about them? And not so many monuments of their culture have survived to this day. In total, throughout Spain, scientists were able to collect around 20 archaeological finds related to Tartessos. 3 of them were excavated in the Guadiana Valley: Cancho Roano, Casas del Turrunuelo, and La Mata. Let's start with the first one. Cancho Roano was discovered in 1978. This find was one of the most significant pieces of the puzzle. This is one of the most beautifully preserved structures of the Tartessian civilization. Not only the walls have survived to this day, but so did the altar, the moat, and even several artifacts. For example, some jewelry and wine glasses. It was a square building surrounded by a deep moat filled with water. And, to be honest, we still don't know its exact purpose. We only assume that it could be an ancient temple. Some rituals were carried out there. For instance, they would set fire to the temple and cover it with thick layers of sand and clay. They even left some expensive artifacts inside, tools, gold jewelry, and so on. Moving on to the next find. Casas del Turrunuelo is one of the best preserved buildings in the entire Western Mediterranean. We only discovered it a couple of years ago, back in 2015. And it hasn't been studied that well yet. But we already know that this place is also pretty weird. Casas del Turrunuelo was a very rich building. It wasn't just some kind of temporary camp. It was a place of monumental, impressive architecture. Massive staircases, vaulted ceilings, luxurious materials brought from all over the Mediterranean, and the latest construction technologies. It was supposed to be a place of power, maybe even something like a palace. And yep, it also became the venue for the rituals. It's unclear whether the locals intended to destroy this beautiful place from the very beginning, but this is where they performed the greatest ritual in the area. This ritual involved more than 50 animals, including the most valuable ones, horses. It was their only means of transportation. The fact that these people gave away their horses may indicate that they plan to stay here for some time. Perhaps they hope to appease the deities and settle on local lands. The ritual was carried out exactly as they intended. And just like Cancho Ruano, this place was also set on fire. When the ritual ended, the locals buried this place and left, disappearing into the countryside of the Iberian Peninsula. Now it's an abandoned and quiet place. Just like Cancho Ruano, it's been standing here untouched for more than 2,000 years. The last find is La Mata, which was discovered much earlier than the other two, back in 1930. The resemblance between all of them was striking. La Mata had the same fate. It was burned and forgotten for centuries. All of this is very strange and mysterious. It seems like the locals were fleeing from something. Perhaps something happened that made them start building these banquet halls and arranging large-scale rituals. They thought that their deities turned away from them and tried to appease them. But unfortunately, it didn't work. As a result, they were forced to leave their temples and soon disappeared altogether forever. And by the way, why did they disappear at all? Well, this is another mystery of this civilization. One of the most important questions is, did they know that they were going to disappear? Or was it something unexpected? Did they suffer some kind of sudden catastrophe from which they were trying to escape? Or something else? Scientists have several theories on this. The first theory says that there may have been several major earthquakes and subsequent tsunamis in this region. These natural disasters destroyed local settlements and severely demoralized the survivors. Perhaps they were looking for salvation from this. Another theory is that there were some problems with trading. Since they were rich in metal and lived off their economy, any problems in it could lead to big troubles. If they had some kind of mining crisis, then relations between different nations could worsen greatly, and things could get pretty nasty. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. The most current theory says that around the 6th century BC, a large-scale tsunami hit the port. This greatly damaged the economy, which worsened the relationship between Tartessos and its neighbors. In any case, this seems to be speculation. This place is like a dream come true for archaeologists. It stores a huge amount of information and secrets that we have yet to unravel. The Tartessians had no idea that by burying their artifacts, they were making a real gift to the scientists of the future. And while scientists continue to study them, we can check out the stuff they have already discovered. History lovers can see Tartessian tools, horse figurines, and decorated ivory in the Archaeological Museum of Badajoz. Let's hope that in the future, scientists will learn more interesting things about this civilization, and we'll finally find out what happened to them. In February 1961, 3 adventurous rock lovers were searching for geodes near Olancha, California. They took one of their findings home and studied it because it looked pretty unusual. They managed to cut through the matrix and discovered something unexpected inside. Instead of the usual mineral formations, it had a cylindrical object resembling porcelain inside. There was a metal shaft at its center, and around it, a hexagonal sheath made of copper and some unidentified substance. Its discoverers were hoping they had found an example of some unknown technology from 500,000 years ago. It could be proof that there was a hyper-advanced ancient civilization like Atlantis, or that time travel was real. Maybe someone came all the way from the future and accidentally dropped the item. Or maybe some intelligent extraterrestrial beings brought it when visiting Earth. If any of these theories were true, it would mean that scientists have to completely rewrite all human history as we know it. But not everyone shared the excitement, and truth seekers and alternative archaeology circles were trying to solve the mystery of the so-called Coso artifact until the late 90s with theories and debates. Then a group of skeptics took images and x-rays of the discovery and showed them to spark plug collectors. They have identified the artifact as a spark plug with corroded metal components from the 1920s and not ancient technology at all. Almost 20 years later, one of the co-discoverers of the artifact agreed to take it for inspection at the University of Washington. They officially confirmed it was a 1920s-era champion spark plug. And the stone matrix containing the artifact wasn't a geode, but a concretion. Those can form because of natural processes over decades or years, but not millennia. The Koso artifact is a good example of an out-of-place artifact, which is a thing in pseudo-archaeology. It's something found in a place or time where it shouldn't logically be. These artifacts seem too advanced for the time period they're found in. They could also mean human activity existed when humans weren't supposed to be around. The Baghdad Battery is another example of such an artifact. It was found in the 1930s by a German archaeologist and consists of a clay jar, a copper cylinder, and an iron rod going through the jar's stopper. Its top, which was broken off, probably had been sealed with asphalt. Its discoverer noticed that it had two different metals and possibly an electrolyte, which are key components of a battery. There are no ancient writings to support this theory, but when scientists ran tests and filled it with an ionic solution like vinegar or wine, it showed that it could conduct electricity. If it really was a battery from 2,000 years ago, it might have been used in ancient medical practices, or even embedded in statues to make it look like they were buzzing to impress people. Kionich, who found it, believed it was used for electroplating, a process for coating metals. Even if it was used as a battery, the Baghdad artifact could only produce a small amount of energy, around 1 volt of electricity. So, some people believe it was used as a storage container for sacred scrolls. Back in the 1930s, a couple stumbled upon something strange while walking along Red Creek in London, Texas. It was a piece of wood sticking out of what looked like an ancient rock formation. Around a decade later, their son, who was really curious to find out its secret, decided to crack open the rock and found a surprisingly modern hammer inside. This discovery caught the attention of Carl Baugh, a young Earth creationist who claimed the rock surrounding the hammer dated back to the Cretaceous period. He saw it as evidence against evolutionary theory. After some investigation, scientists proved that the rock was not as ancient as it seemed. Geological processes have just encased the modern hammer over time, so it wasn't evidence of humans coexisting with dinosaurs like the Flintstones, as some hoped. It was just a case of a miner dropping his hammer centuries ago and nature doing its thing. A Chinese archaeologist supposedly stumbled upon some caves that seemed to serve as a burial ground for small beings with big, oval heads. Alongside these remains, there was rock art depicting figures with round helmets, the sun, the moon, the earth, and stars connected by groups of pea-sized dots. They also found over 700 mysterious stone discs etched with spiral grooves. Things got even weirder when these discs were sent to a Chinese professor who claimed the grooves were actually written characters. According to his translation, the discs told the tale of Dropa visitors from another planet who had crashed their spaceship on Earth about 12,000 years ago and had tried to live among us until they were hunted down by locals. But there's no concrete evidence that any of this actually happened. The story was first published back in the 1960s in a couple of articles, but it all seemed a bit fishy. None of the people involved, the archaeologist, the professor, or even the university they supposedly worked at, seemed to have left any trace in the records. And while there is a group in Tibet called the Dropka, they're fully human, not extraterrestrial visitors, and there's no solid proof that the Dropa stones exist at all. In a remote part of China, there are some bizarre pipe-like formations known as the Beigan pipes. A local explorer found them back in 1996, protruding from Mount Beigan and along the shores of Tosan Lake nearby. Some people thought they were the work of ancient guests from other planets. When samples of the pipe material were tested, they contained mostly common minerals, but there was a mysterious 8% of unknown stuff. Special testing revealed that these pipes had been there before humans. Chinese geologists later visited the site and suggested that these pipes were formed naturally over time. It could be sediment piling up in the fissures in the earth, or even fossilized tree roots from the area's lush past, but it's not certain. There's a mysterious terracotta head in Mexico with a hard-to-pronounce name, discovered back in the 1930s during a burial excavation. This head looked a lot like fancy Roman statues, so it wasn't clear what it was doing in Mexico. For some reason, the discoverer kept it secret for several decades. The head was found in a pyramid with 3 floors about 40 miles from Mexico City, alongside gold, copper, and pottery. Some argue that if this head really is many centuries old, it could mean the Romans or some other civilization had made it to Mesoamerica before Columbus did. There are also drift voyage theories mentioning a shipwreck after which some artifacts and survivors made it ashore. Some suggest that this figurine head was a little souvenir brought over by the Vikings. But there's no solid archaeological proof of the Vikings meeting the folks in Mesoamerica. There are some artifacts floating around, but none of them have been stamped as undeniable evidence of pre-Columbian contact, so the mystery of how this head ended up where it did remains unsolved. While digging a trench along a river in Romania, workers found a wedge, which is now famous as the aluminum wedge of Ajud, or the object of Ajud. Right next to it, there were some mastodon bones. Those distant relatives of elephants lived 11,000 years ago, so the wedge is probably of the same age. The cool part is that it's made of aluminum, a metal not even discovered until the 1800s. This material requires serious heat to produce. The wedge is also covered in a thick layer of oxide that's been sitting there for hundreds of years. Some folks believe this wedge must have crash-landed here on a spacecraft from some other planet. Some scientists think it's all a hoax, and others suppose it might be a human-made object with an unknown purpose.
Reshaped structure is a giant formation in the Sahara that looks exactly like a giant bullseye. It's so wide that you can see it from space. Even the CIA got interested in it. In 1965, they planned a flyover looking for geomagnetic anomalies. The findings are still classified. Perhaps the theories are true, and this place is truly the lost city of Atlantis. Now, Atlantis supposedly sank beneath the waves, but recent discoveries are pointing us in a different direction. This is an ancient story that goes far back in time, and Plato was the first to mention it. The place had loads of greenery and a curious structure: 3 concentric circles of land surrounding 2 circles of water. 2 key quotes from Plato's writing suggest that Atlantis might not have been a typical island in the middle of the ocean. Plus, Atlantis had a major influence from Africa and Europe, challenging the idea of it being in the Atlantic. It turns out that the Eye of the Sahara and Atlantis look alike. When astronauts saw the Eye of Sahara from above, they initially suspected a meteorite impact crater, but the rings of the structure matched the layout described of Atlantis. More importantly, the Sahara wasn't always a desert. It turned from a tropical region into a desert around 11,000 years ago. Researchers found evidence of a massive river called the Tamaracet that could have sustained a community. This river flowed toward the reshaped structure, aligning with Plato's description. The Trans-Saharan Seaway ran through the Sahara 50 to 100 million years ago. The sea allegedly destroyed Atlantis around 11,500 years ago, likely due to a rapid rise in sea level caused by the end of the Ice Age. NASA's worldview imagery shows patterns consistent with this theory. Those concentric rings might be a key to unlocking the secrets of our planet's evolution over millions of years. They're shaped by erosion on resilient rock layers, creating a spooky pattern of ridges and troughs. The central peak stands proud at 1,300 feet. The central part has undergone a significant erosion makeover, revealing a circular structure with a raised peak. Unlike impact craters, the Eye of the Sahara flaunts a striking balance and symmetry. Some say it results from rock uplift, sculpted by wind and water. Others think it's an ancient anticline, eroded to reveal its concentric glory. Then there's a salt diapir theory, suggesting that salt's buoyancy sculpted this beauty. Dating techniques have proved that it formed 541 to 252 million years ago, give or take a million or two. Ancient tools are scattered around the outer rings of the structure near riverbeds. Some older stone tools have also been spotted in the same areas. And still, even though some spear points from the Neolithic period have been found, there aren't many signs that people were living there back then. The area seems to have been used for short-term activities like hunting and making tools. There are other unearthly mysteries that haunt our world. One such enigma is in Norway, the ominous Hessdalen light phenomenon, also known as the Valley of Lights, leaves scientists confused. This valley is 10 miles wide. It's quite isolated, but a peculiar blue box sits high on the hillside, equipped with cameras scanning the valley. The unsettling saga began in the 1980s, when the night sky over Hessdalen erupted with burning fireballs, a recurring spectacle that sent shivers down the spines of those who witnessed it. This wasn't a fleeting occurrence, rather it became a regular thing. Terrified locals reported encounters with these unexplained luminous phenomena, some of which happened near their homes. Unease spread like wildfire. At its peak, there were about 20 sightings every week. The phenomenon made its way into newspapers, magazines, and media worldwide. Soon, people flocked to the valley, hoping to see the lights themselves. In 1984, experts joined the fray, armed with sophisticated instruments like magnetometers, radiometers, and other ometers. What they encountered was mind-bending, lights that defied explanation. Some moved at a leisurely pace, while others raced through the sky at an astonishing 19,000 miles per hour. People tried to explain these lights: airplanes, distant reflections, ball lightning, satellites, planets, meteors. But the speed and how these lights danced ruled out all those theories. We're slowly approaching another mysterious place. This is the greatest subglacial lake among Antarctica's 675 known lakes. It can easily hide unknown life forms. This lake is beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. Dive about 2.5 miles under the ice, and there you'll see Lake Vostok, located at 1,600 feet below sea level. This lake is 155 miles long and 31 miles wide at its broadest point. With an average depth of 1,400 feet, it's also the world's sixth largest by volume. It's like an underwater city with lofty pillars and deep bases. The secret lake was discovered in 1993, yet it had been waiting to be found down there for over 2,000 years, collecting ancient secrets. In 2012, scientists drilled through the ice, creating the longest ice core ever. They pierced the ice all the way to the lake's surface. The year 2013 brought an unexpected twist when the tranquil waters erupted during the extraction of an ice core, mixing with drilling fluids. Then they got a pristine water sample in 2015. Some believe there might be previously unknown life forms down there, since it's a fossil water reserve that's been untouched for millions of years. That could be a lot like those speculated ice-covered oceans on moons like Europa and Enceladus. It all started with a theory in the 19th century, suggesting fresh water lurking under Antarctic ice sheets. Then, in 1955, seismic soundings hinted at a subglacial lake, and by the 90s, satellite data confirmed Lake Vostok's existence. Now, Lake Vostok isn't alone. In 2005, they found an island in the middle of the lake. Then, two smaller lakes joined the party. They suspect that a secret network of subglacial rivers might link these lakes. Now, very far away from Antarctica, in Venezuela, Catatumbo lightning presents a sinister light show at the junction of the Catatumbo River and Lake Maracaibo. This unsettling lightning phenomenon happens at about 140 to 160 nights a year, going on for 10 hours a day, and can flash up to 280 times in a single hour. The frequency of this lightning show changes with the seasons and from year to year. There was a break between January to March in 2010, causing a bit of worry that it might vanish forever. As the sun sets, winds from the east start picking up speed. This strong wind is called a nocturnal low-level jet, like what you see in the Great Plains of North America. These winds bring moisture, mostly from the Caribbean and the lake itself. This humid air hits high mountain ridges, causing thunderstorms to form over the mountains. Thanks to the ongoing wind situation, more thunderstorms appear as the night goes on. This pattern repeats itself, and is why this area has the highest annual lightning rate globally. The next place scientists cannot explain is in China. That is the Longyu Caves. They have lofty slanted roofs and sturdy pillars. The spot remained hidden for centuries. These human-made caverns, built around 2,000 years ago, decided to reveal themselves only in the 90s. Local farmers drained some ponds and unveiled 5 massive caverns. Further digging exposed an additional 19 smaller caves. They range from 60 to 110 feet in width and 26 to 50 feet in height. Archaeologists found historical relics from the reign of Emperor Zhuan of Han, dating back to over 2,000 years ago. Now, how did these caves survive for more than 2 millennia without falling apart? No ancient records explain the way they were crafted either. The walls show chisel marks, hinting at some layer-by-layer chiseling action, but the exact construction process is still a head-scratcher.
Around 5.3 million years ago, a crucial event reshaped the Mediterranean region. It was a colossal flood that refilled the local sea, which had been extremely barren and salty up until that point. It got the name Zanclean Flood, and it forever changed the geography of the area. The Mediterranean Sea is surrounded by Europe, Africa, and Asia, and connects to the ocean by the Strait of Gibraltar. This is quite a narrow passage, measuring about 8 miles. It may not be that wide, but the strait plays a crucial role in maintaining the liquid balance between these two bodies of water. About 6 million years ago, a bunch of things might have caused the Mediterranean to be cut off from the Atlantic Ocean. Some say it was an ice age. Others speak of tectonic movements, like earthquakes. Whatever the cause, it pushed the Mediterranean area into a period called the Mycenaean Salinity Crisis. For about 1,000 years, the sea slowly evaporated, leaving behind a dry basin that was several miles below sea level. This crisis really changed the landscape, creating conditions similar to those found in today's Dead Sea. What this means is that the lush Mediterranean beauty used to be a super salty environment, containing nearly 10 times more salt than the ocean. Say you could have visited. You would have been able to effortlessly float on the little water you could find, even if you're not a skilled swimmer. The amount of salt and that mineral content would have made it challenging for most creatures to survive. However, some hardy microorganisms, such as bacteria, could have adapted to these harsh conditions. These days, at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, we can find holes as large as the Grand Canyon, and they seem to have formed during that same period of dehydration. Evidence suggests that massive rivers, such as the Nile and the Rhone, flowed directly into the Mediterranean back then, leaving behind canyons as they reached the bottom, thousands of feet below the sea level. People had to find some sort of explanation back in the day for the drying of the Mediterranean, so they came up with myths and legends. One such tale was told by the people of southern Iberia, in modern-day Spain and Portugal. It was also recounted by a famous Roman writer called Pliny the Elder. What this legend said was that the Mediterranean used to be cut out from the ocean until the hero Hercules, with his mighty sword, carved a path. He did so between a fictional location in modern-day Africa and the Rock of Gibraltar. This allowed the ocean waters to flow in, transforming the Mediterranean into what we know today. Some fossils also seem to confirm the unusually large flood. Remains of marine organisms were found in layers high above current sea levels. This means the areas were once submerged underwater. These fossils belong to mollusks, fish, and marine mammals. Because of modern techniques, we now have at least an estimated timing of the Zanclean flood. Scientists used computer simulations to reconstruct the event, providing further evidence that it was real. What they also discovered is that there's a possibility the Mediterranean might change once more. The Strait of Gibraltar could close, most likely because of movements deep under the ground. This could lead to the Mediterranean becoming dry again, over a span of about 1,000 years. The Mediterranean area could disappear altogether if the African continent keeps shifting north too, getting closer to Europe. Another one of those famous yet still a bit hypothetical large floods is called the Black Sea Deluge Theory. Some scientists think that around 8,400 years ago, water from the Mediterranean might have spilled over into the Black Sea through a narrow passage called the Bosporus Strait. This could have caused a massive disaster, forcing people living near the Black Sea to pack up their things and move further inside the continent in both Europe and Asia. Along with them, they might have carried stories about this colossal flood. The specialist that came up with this idea also suggested that these migrating people might have brought along new ways of farming. Not everyone from the scientific community is convinced, though. Some argue that while there might have been a flood, it likely happened earlier and was way smaller. They didn't think this flood could have caused, for example, the story of Noah's Ark. In this legend, a spiritual man was warned by a higher entity that a giant flood was on its way. The man went to gather pairs of animals and pack them all in a boat, to make sure these species would survive the devastating flood. There was also the concern among scholars that discussing real floods and ancient stories too much might blur the lines between science and fiction. There may be other reasons why these flood stories are so often found across different cultures all over our planet. One idea is that floods were incredibly destructive for early farmers, so they invented myths about them signaling the end of the world. Another idea is that people stumbled upon ancient sea creature fossils in unusual places, leading them to believe there was a significant flood in the past. The solution to future floods, though, might be floating cities. As sea levels continue to rise, coastal cities like Amsterdam, New Orleans, and Venice may go under. So, floating infrastructure may be the way to go, with buildings that can rise with the water levels, making them able to resist extreme weather too. Countries like the Netherlands, which have a history of managing water risks, are pioneering these floating creations. With cities running out of space for expansion, we might be forced to move on water anyway. By moving on the water, we can reduce crowding and create more interesting ways to feed ourselves, like floating gardens. These homes also come with great alternatives to our energy needs through systems that use solar and wind power. Not to mention that these homes might turn out to be cheaper in the long run. One such floating city might pop up soon in the Maldives. Its goal is to host up to 20,000 people and will feature places to live and eat, but also shops and schools. Designed to look like coral, the region will include canals placed between some 5,000 floating pieces of land. The city will be constructed using modular units, put together in a construction site nearby. After they're completed, they'll be towed to the floating city. The next step is to secure them to a large underwater concrete hull, which is screwed tightly to the seabed on some steel stilts. All these pieces of construction let the modular units easily move as naturally as the sea. Even for those that are afraid of seasickness, there's a solution. That's what the nearby coral reef is for. It will surround the city, making a natural wave breaker. Human-made coral banks will also be placed underneath the city, which will also help coral grow naturally. The long-term goal is to make the establishment self-sufficient. It will have electricity, mostly from on-site solar power. Waste will be treated nearby and reused as plant fertilizer. Instead of air conditioning, the city will use deep-sea water cooling. This method pumps cold water from the deep sea to cool the area, saving energy. Earth is not the only planet that's seen some serious floods. In ancient times, Mars seems to have experienced them too, and they played an important role in shaping its surface. Recent research reveals that billions of years ago, Mars was heavily affected by some serious river flooding, which contributed to the formation of its valleys and canyons. The reason for these floods was heavy rainfall, which reshaped the Martian landscape in a jiffy, at times even within days or weeks. Unlike Earth, where rivers form pretty slowly, Mars experienced rapid changes because of these floods, particularly around 4 billion years ago. We've known for quite some time that there have been floods on Mars, but this study really showed us their extent. We now know they were more widespread and frequent than previously thought.
There once was a kingdom where the ancient Egyptians traveled to buy gifts for pharaohs, sort of like an ancient shopping mall. This kingdom, named the Land of Punt, was rich in luxury goods, including gold, aromatic resins, blackwood, ebony, ivory, and exotic animals like leopards and baboons. All of these sound like great gift ideas to me. The Land of Punt was an especially important trading partner for Egypt for over 1,000 years. But if you plan to go there, the bad news is that it hasn't survived to these days, and nobody knows for sure exactly where Punt was located. We only know about it from records. The most famous of them were left on the walls of the temple of Queen Hatshepsut, who had sent an expedition to Punt. Scientists have been trying to find the exact location of this rich land for over 150 years. It could have been southeast of Egypt, in a coastal region south of it along the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, and the Indian Ocean, or it could have covered the Horn of Africa and the area across the sea in southern Arabia. Now researchers were finally able to narrow down the possible locations thanks to a study of baboon mummies. Ancient Egyptians admired baboons and even thought they were related to the deity of the moon and wisdom. One species, the sacred baboon, was often shown in wall paintings, sitting with its tail curled to the right and was mummified in this position. Another type, the olive baboon, was wrapped up in one giant cocoon. Both types were found in the tombs of the Valley of the Kings. But if you remember geography lessons, baboons just don't wander around Egypt, so they must have been brought there through trade with other regions. Primatologists, Egyptologists, geographers, and geochemists look at the mummified baboons from two different time periods in ancient Egypt. Some were from the New Kingdom period, and others were from the Ptolemaic period. The scientists did some more hard work and analyzed tissues from 155 baboons from 75 separate places in Eastern Africa and Southern Arabia. Those were all areas that they thought could be the ancient land of Punt. They measured oxygen and strontium in the baboons' bodies. When animals drink water and eat plants, their teeth, hair, and bones show a geographic signature of where they've lived, thanks to these elements they contain. Scientists use a special method called isotopic mapping, and found out that the New Kingdom baboons they analyzed came from a location in Eritrea, Ethiopia, or Somalia. 5 mummified baboons from the Ptolemaic period had strontium levels that matched those found in Egypt. So ancient Egyptians might have had a special place to breed and keep baboons, probably in Memphis, a city in Lower Egypt, not Tennessee. Meanwhile, paleontologists from New Zealand got lucky, as some boulders had split open from the tide and revealed fossils of the largest penguin that has ever lived on Earth. The scientists used laser scanners to make 3D models of the ancient penguin bones. They compared these bones to the flipper size of modern penguins and did some math as to how much the old penguins might have weighed. Today, the biggest penguins, emperor penguins, weigh between 55 to 100 pounds. Researchers think that the penguins from the past that they found weighed around 340 pounds, real giants in the penguin world. These huge flightless birds lived in the oceans around New Zealand more than 50 million years ago, after the dinosaurs went extinct. They totally took advantage of their big bodies to stay warm in the cold water. They might have even traveled the world thanks to it. And they'd scare off any predators, but they didn't have any. The asteroid that took down the dinosaurs also got rid of most big marine reptiles, and the ancestors of seals and whales were still living on land. Back in 1992, 4 farmers in China were draining water from their ponds and accidentally bumped into a ship full of gold and ancient statues worth millions. Just kidding, they actually found the Longyu Caves. Those are 24 big caves created by people a long time ago. Even though they are so large and well-made, no one knows who built them, why they were built, or how they were built. Experts think the caves are at least 2,000 years old, but they don't understand why these caves aren't mentioned in any historical records. All of the Longyu caverns look the same and aren't connected to each other. Each cave has one entrance connected to a vertical shaft with a carved staircase. Rain and water from the surface can flow into the caves through these stairs. To manage this water, the caves have special grooves, channels, and a system to catch the water at the bottom. So it looks like the ancient builders were real pros when it came to drainage and water management. Maybe my town could learn a lesson from them, as it turns into Venice after every heavy shower. Anyway, the caverns were built below a hill, named after a bird that is one of the most respected creatures in Chinese mythology and culture. It symbolizes all the best things, like high virtue, grace, and the union of yin and yang. Scientists think there could be a connection between the caverns and the bird, but it's just a theory so far. Experts from the National Institute of Ocean Technology in India were doing their routine pollution surveys when they found some structures that looked like a city underwater. Using special sonar technology, the team found big geometric shapes on the ocean floor. They brought up different items from the site, like pottery, beads, sculptures, parts of walls, and even human bones and teeth. They thought the ruins belonged to a civilization older than the Bronze Age Indus Valley Civilization, which is the earliest urban culture of the Indian subcontinent that we know of so far. But not everyone joined in on celebrating this awesome discovery. Some archaeologists refused to believe it and thought it could be some computer tricks. And even when they saw hundreds of artifacts from the ocean floor, they said an ancient river could have brought them there from someplace else. The team that discovered the underwater site decided to prove they were right. They chose a piece of wood as their main evidence. They tested it and found it was 9,500 years old. That could be the age of the entire site. Skeptics still insist that we can't rewrite all human history because of one piece of wood. Even 23 years since the discovery, no one is sure about the final answer. This is partly because it's hard to explore the site. It's in extremely dangerous waters with strong currents and riptides. During the cool Antarctica's summer, from late November through January, geologists from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee climb the frozen slopes of the McIntyre Promontory in the Transantarctic Mountains. High above the ice fields, they look through the mountain's gray rocks for fossils from when the continent had green forests. By the end of their trip, the geologists found fossil pieces from 13 trees. These fossils show that the trees are over 260 million years old. This means the forest grew at the end of the Permian period before the first dinosaurs even appeared. More than 90% of all species on Earth disappeared back then, including the polar forests. These trees would have been very tough if they grew in Antarctica and could have survived. But a huge increase in gases like carbon dioxide and methane must have taken them down. This Antarctic forest is a terrific way for us to see what life was like before the extinction, and we might even understand what caused it. It also shows us how plants were different back then from those we are used to now.
Imagine you get to be an archaeologist for the day. You'll travel the world to solve the mystery of long-lost civilizations that disappeared without a trace. Grab your chisel and fedora, and let's go. You arrive at the American Southwest, where an ancient mystery is waiting to be solved. You make your way to Chaco Canyon, just outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's hot and dry in this deserted area. You're here to visit the ancient ruins of the Anasazi people. It's said that they were a thriving civilization that met a mysterious end. You hike a few miles before you begin to make out the shape of dwellings, constructions built of stone in the middle of the canyon. This is Pueblo Bonito, a 10th century complex that contains as many as 800 rooms and stands over 5 stories tall. The buildings are beautiful and made from sandstone. To access the complex, its inhabitants built a 400-mile network of roads, some of them 30 feet wide. You can't wrap your head around the fact that it was built so long ago. Everything looks so well preserved. The Anasazi reigned over the so-called Four Corners region from 100 CE to around 1600 CE. During this time, they built a civilization that sprawled over 30,000 square miles, including Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Arizona. Standing inside a huge kiva, an underground ceremonial chamber, you wonder what happened to the Anasazi people. Scientists have analyzed tree rings and found out that the Anasazi population lived through a period of great drought. The drought is believed to have lasted 23 years, and there was possibly no rain at all during this time. This definitely affected their livelihood, from malnutrition to battles over food and resources. But was it enough to make 30,000 people flee their homes? Researchers say these people left their homes with their belongings still in place. Ladles were left in ceramic bowls. Granaries were full of supplies. It was as if they intended to return, but never had the chance to come back. For many years, archaeologists have believed that the drought was the reason for the disappearance of this thriving society. But there's other evidence that shows a different story. Anthropologists say that the ancestral Puebloans, as they are also called, were an exemplary population. They were peaceful and lived together in harmony. But that's not what their architecture shows. They isolated themselves from the rest of the world by building their settlements so high on top of cliffs. And they built walls and other security structures in order to protect themselves. What were they so afraid of? Recently, archaeologists began to study bone fossils of the ancestral Puebloans, and they found evidence that suggests that toward the end of their civilization, things might have gotten pretty bad. Evidence shows that local leaders were ruling using fear-based methods. severe punishment started to be inflicted on those who did not follow their strict rules. Why this happened is still a mystery, and you might need many other excavation trips to find out the truth. It's lucky that your next destination is really close by. Still in New Mexico, you'll visit the Blackwater Draw. It's a national prehistoric site that holds the story of the Clovis people. You're shocked to find out that the Clovis are possibly the oldest humans to have inhabited the U.S. They were the first humans to allegedly cross the Bering Strait and follow the ice-free trails down to the U.S.'s southern plains. Try to picture what this area looked like when the Clovis people roamed this land. A huge spring-fed lake with mammoths, giant sloths, saber-toothed tigers, and bison much bigger than the ones we have today wandering around. The archaeological site you're visiting shows that the Clovis population were big game hunters. You're able to identify the bones of several mammoths and even the stone tools that our prehistoric ancestors used to hunt them. Some of these date back to 13,000 years ago, aka the end of the last ice age. You're presented with two possible theories on the disappearance of the Clovis population. It's possible that during the final 1,500 years of the last ice age, changes in climate caused a shortage of food. Scientists also believe that this situation was worsened by overhunting. Another theory suggests that a large meteor hit North America, and this was enough to alter the climate and make the Clovis people migrate southward to try to survive. But the truth is, there's no evidence that any of that happened. Next, you'll fly to the Pacific Ocean, to the mysterious Easter Island. This place has left us with many questions, from the building of 13-foot-high face statues to the sudden disappearance of the Rapa Nui people who inhabited the area. You approach the island at Anakina, a white sandy beach on the island's northern shore. Researchers believe this area was one of the first settlements of the Rapa Nui. You could say you're standing at the end of the world, as you're over 3,000 miles away from South America and 1,000 miles away from the nearest island. Around 800 CE, when the first humans arrived, the island was an oasis. Today, the area is mostly deserted. You get your first clue on the fall of the Rapa Nui from an excavation pit you open at the beach. There's clear evidence of human presence: charcoal, tools, and bones, some of them belonging to rats. Bingo! When humans arrived at Easter Island, they brought along rodent companions. They probably didn't know this at the time, but these rodents would contribute largely to their demise. Rats love palm trees, which helped to deforest the natural vegetation of the island gradually over the years. But there's another clue. Looking into genetic data, you discover that South Americans came into contact with the Rapa Nui around 1722. What might have happened to this population is the same that happened to other more isolated groups. The contact with foreign groups brought about diseases that possibly led to the end of the Rapa Nui. To finish off your trip, you're headed to Cambodia. The country was once home to the Great Khmer Empire from the 9th century CE to the 15th century CE. The ruins of this place are magnificent. Your main excavation site is the Plains of Angkor, built alongside the Mekong River. This huge site was the most important Khmer city at the time. Just FYI, Angkor actually means capital city in the Khmer language. The Khmer were able to build a huge network of roads connecting Angkor with the rest of the empire. And it's believed that up to 1 million people were spread throughout the Khmer Empire at its peak days. It was the largest pre-industrial city in the entire world. It's comparable in size to modern-day Los Angeles, just so you can get an idea. The Khmers were also master builders and engineers. They managed to build a complex irrigation system that helped their rice farming through the centuries. And to connect their cities, they built almost 500 miles of intricate highways and bridges. Oh, and not to mention the complex architecture of their religious buildings, such as Angkor Wat, one of today's most visited tourist sites in Cambodia. It took over 30 years to build. and it spreads over almost 500 acres. Back in the day, its towers were probably decorated with gold, but today, the site is a maze of vine-covered temples. Like your fellow researchers that came here before you, you're unsure of what caused this civilization to be wiped off the map. One possible guess has to do with the climate in the region. Strong monsoons might have caused massive floods and severe damage to the infrastructure, especially to the water system the Khmer people heavily relied on to survive. But another reason could have been regional conflict and immigration. Toward the end of the 15th century, the empire started to decline in numbers, and this could have weakened its strong power. You might not go home with many answers, but you've certainly learned a lot, huh?
Imagine you were chosen to answer one of history's most important questions. What was the first civilization on Earth? The job description is simple, yet the task is extremely challenging. You need to unearth the proof of the world's first official civilization. Was it the Sumerians in Old Mesopotamia? Or was it the ancient Egyptians spread out along the Nile River? Not to make you nervous or anything, but history is quite literally in your hands. Good luck! Since you can't turn back the clock and visit Old Mesopotamia to get the answers to your questions, you'll need to research museum databases in order to get some clues. First things first, we need a definition of what is considered a civilization. It's not just thousands of people grouped together and living harmoniously. There are some key elements that together make a group of people a civilization. Like, for example, the domain of urbanism, aka city building, irrigation systems, and writing. You decide to begin your search by diving deep into the history of the Sumerians, which today hold the position of the world's first civilization. Now, imagine being the first of your kind. This means having no external examples. Rather, it means starting from scratch. First thing you'll need? A piece of land. And since there were no active water companies in the world at that time, you'll need a piece of land with easy access to water. So, the Sumerians settled between two major rivers, known as the Euphrates and the Tigris in southern Mesopotamia around 5000 BCE. Fun fact, Mesopotamia translates to the land between two rivers. On a modern-day map, it's more or less where Iraq is situated today. Together with land, a civilization needs ways to get food. The Sumer civilization had to face a dry and hot climate, but they managed to make agriculture thrive in the region. By diverting river waters and creating reservoirs and dams, the Sumerians allowed for a series of settlements to emerge across Mesopotamian plains. The famous city of Babylon was one of them. You know, the city that supposedly had those hanging gardens? I say supposedly because no definitive proof of the real existence of this monument has ever been found. However, it was considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and cited as a remarkable feat of engineering in an ancient book published around 290 BCE. Although no record was found of the Gardens of Babylon, the Sumerians were recognized as extremely skilled builders. Their cities were filled with mud brick constructions, and the most impressive ones were known as ziggurats, stepped pyramids that were built for spiritual purposes. The Sumerians built a trade network to supplement scarce resources and started to exchange goods with civilizations rising nearby, like Anatolia and Egypt. The beginning of trade was what drove the Sumerians to develop what is believed to be the world's first writing system. It began as a simple system, likely dating back to 3400 BCE. In this system, each syllable was represented with a drawing. Later, it gradually evolved into a fully formed cursive writing system. Don't believe me? Take a look at this piece from the Babylonian times. This huge basalt plaque is called the Hammurabi Code. It's known to be humanity's first collection of written laws. As far as the story goes, it was carved in volcanic stone around year 1760 BCE. Look at the precision of these carvings. It's quite astonishing. But the content is also surprising, since these 282 rules vary from commercial regulations to strict laws of justice. The thing is, historians don't have a consensus on whether the Sumerians were really the first ones to invent writing. Some think it might have been Old Egyptians. Let's pause here. Ancient Egyptian settlements are believed to have started around the year 5500 BCE, which is earlier than the Sumer civilization. But remember I said a civilization needed a few things before it was considered as such. Ancient Egypt consisted of several smaller city-states, such as Memphis, Abydos, and Thebes, spreading out along the Nile River. It wasn't until 3000 BCE that Egypt was unified under one kingdom and lasted as an empire until nearly 1000 BCE. Although there is no consensus on this, some Egypt experts believed that it could have been Sumerian immigrants that founded early Egyptian settlements. The proof could be the presence of cylinder seals made of hard stone, something that was widely used in Sumer. These seals were used to guarantee authenticity in legal transactions, but it's hard to say whether this method was introduced by Sumerian immigrants or simply by trade. Since the time period is not one of the criteria we can use to determine who came first, we'll have to turn to something else. But what? Like the Sumerians, the Egyptians were also highly skilled builders. Duh, they built the famous Giza pyramids and many others all over their territory. In order to enhance their building techniques, they delved into developing a more profound understanding of mathematics. They developed a new form of measurement called the cubit, which was the equivalent of an arm's length. The Great Pyramid, for instance, is 440 cubits per 440 cubits. They were also innovative astronomers, combining their mathematical skills with attentive astronomical observation. They were the first civilization to use a 24-hour division of the day. And they even created a solar calendar, which was the first dating system in history to feature 365 days in 1 year. Okay, it's undeniable how impressive they were. But some experts say that the dispute has to be settled through the comparison of their writing systems. Hieroglyphic writing, the first Egyptian style of writing, is said to date back to 3000 BCE. It was a composition of over 700 symbols, which were carved in stone. For a long time, researchers believed that the Sumerian writing had come before Egyptian, but in a recent discovery made by Yale researchers claims otherwise. Archaeologists have discovered a panel of 4 signs that are believed to have been written around 3250 BCE. Oh, and they've also found another rock drawing depicting a pregnant elephant that can date back to 4000 BCE. Now, there's also a third possibility that fewer people seem to mention: the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as Ancient India, located around the area of modern-day Pakistan and India. The Indus Valley Civilization is also a contender for the oldest civilization due to the uncertain historical origins of the Hindu collection of texts known as the Upanishads. The Indus Valley Civilization flourished around 3000 BCE, but records show that people in the Indus Valley were trading with Mesopotamians as early as 3500 BCE. Now, wait a minute. How is it possible? No, they weren't time travelers. This isn't a sci-fi movie. There already were agricultural settlements in the area that were slowly growing into bigger cities, such as Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. Ancient Indian cities were sophisticated, filled with baked brick homes built in a grid system. These ancient cities even had draining and sewage systems that connected most homes and used gravity to carry waste outside of the city. They were pretty advanced. They were also an extremely religious civilization, and Hindu beliefs were at the center of their practices. Despite that, their cities weren't filled with spiritual buildings. Actually, Mohenjo-Daro's most important building was a public bath. Interesting, huh? Now, why can't we know if they were the oldest civilization on Earth? Even if some historians suspect that the origins of the Indus Valley people can be traced back to 5000 BCE, there is no concrete evidence of this, only speculation. The best proof we have is the Upanishads. The Upanishads are texts filled with philosophy, mantras, and ceremonies. The thing is, part of Hindu practices included memorizing and passing down the wisdom of the Upanishads in oral form. So, it took a while before it appeared as a written script. Well, I'd say historians aren't really sure what was the world's first civilization. We can only guess at this point, but who knows what new discoveries might reveal.
Have you heard of Göbekli Tepe? It's an ancient site in Turkey that literally made historians rewrite history books. Over 11,000 years ago, a group of prehistoric humans crafted an enigmatic masterpiece that's even older than Stonehenge. Before its discovery, archaeologists believed that people didn't know about iron and weren't good at making pottery. They were sure that settled life only emerged with the need for agriculture. But Göbekli Tepe changed this belief. The place has revealed that it was the temple that paved the way for a settled life, not agriculture. Until this discovery, researchers believed that farming was the catalyst for sedentary living. Meet Professor Schmidt, the guy whose findings changed this theory. He managed to prove that hunter-gatherer communities laid the very foundations of this way of life. Back in the 1960s, other archaeologists visited the area, but they totally missed the mark. While surveying the region, they stumbled upon a hill with scattered limestone slabs and concluded it was just an old burial ground from medieval times. Little did they know that there was so much more to uncover. In 1994, Schmidt embarked on his own survey of prehistoric sites in the area. Surprise! He instantly realized he had discovered something truly extraordinary. Unlike the nearby flat and barren plateaus, Göbekli Tepe had a gently rounded top, rising 50 feet above the surrounding landscape. Funny enough, the translation of this place's name is Potbelly Hill. Schmidt was sure only humans could have made something like this. Those broken limestone pieces that were mistaken for gravestones turned out to be way more exciting. It was like stumbling upon a hidden treasure. The pieces took on a whole new meaning, and Schmidt with his team was about to dive into the secrets waiting beneath the surface. To their surprise, they found no traces of a settlement, no hearths for cooking, no houses, and none of those adorable clay figurines commonly found in nearby sites of similar age. However, they uncovered that those ancient people used tools like stone hammers. So, Schmidt and his team put their heads together and took a wild guess at the age of Göbekli Tepe's stone structures. Their estimation got backed up by some limited carbon dating done right at the site. The ancient vibes of this place were finally starting to make sense. It was like a puzzle slowly coming together. You may think that back then, people didn't have special tools to create something as cool as Göbekli Tepe. Not true. Turns out, these prehistoric folks used flint tools instead of fancy metal chisels. They were also skilled at chipping away softer limestone and crafting pillars right on the spot. Afterward, they carried the pillars a short distance to the summit and placed them upright. Once the stone rings were complete, they covered them with layers of dirt. Over time, they added new rings, and voila! You've got a cool hill to impress people in the future. During their first year of excavation, the team went through 15,000 pieces of animal bones from wild creatures. These people didn't have pet animals or grow their own food. They hunted wild animals for their meals. But things were about to change, because the place had everything they needed to start farming. Scientists say they had wild sheep and wild grains that could be domesticated. And guess what? Just 20 miles away, geneticists found evidence of the world's oldest domesticated strains of wheat at a prehistoric village. These amazing findings have completely changed how we view civilization. In the past, experts believed that people needed to learn how to farm and settle in one place before they could build temples and develop complex societies. But guess what? Schmidt's research flips that idea on its head. He claims that the incredible effort put into constructing these astonishing structures actually set the stage for the development of advanced societies. It means that societal and cultural changes happened before agriculture. Schmidt has this fascinating hypothesis about Göbekli Tepe. He thinks it could have been a special burial site where people left their loved ones. And here's the twist. The burial site was adorned with fancy statues and symbols representing deities from the spiritual realm. The idea that Göbekli Tepe could have served as a sacred place adds another layer of complexity to the whole story. While the site's true purpose may remain elusive, Schmidt's insights invite us to consider the profound interplay between life and the afterlife, and the deep reverence ancient hunter-gatherer societies may have had for their departed ancestors. Now let's talk about the stars of the show, the mesmerizing T-shaped columns that dominate Göbekli Tepe. These mysterious structures range from 10 to 20 feet tall and most likely represent stylized human figures. But one figure stands out from the rest, the three-dimensional lion relief. This depiction really fires up our imagination. Why? Because it hints at the possibility that lions roamed Anatolia during the Neolithic period. These standing stones are arranged in circles and placed in rectangular pits. Each circle has a similar setup. Two big T-shaped pillars in the center, surrounded by slightly smaller ones facing inward. Talk about a stylish arrangement. These towering pillars reach a whopping 16 feet and weigh between 7 and 10 tons. Some pillars are plain and simple, while others are like works of art with intricate carvings. Foxes, scorpions, and vultures come to life, crawling and twisting on the pillars' sides. But it's not just animals depicted on these stones. Some pillars have abstract shapes representing humans, and even small carvings of clothing items. Some of them even have belts. Now, there's one pillar that stands out from the rest like a rock star. This super old stone pillar suggests that a comet crashed into Earth. It happened during a chilly period that lasted about 1,000 years. Previous studies examining Greenland ice cores hinted at this comet theory, but now the carvings at Göbekli Tepe prove it right. The carvings on the pillars are like a historical comic strip. They even show a headless human figure. Researchers fed the images into a computer and discovered their connections to constellations, indicating that this temple might have been an ancient observatory. It's like our ancestors were trying to document this cataclysmic event in their own unique way. Archaeologists have been excavating and researching Göbekli Tepe since the mid-1990s, peeling back layers of history and providing us with a deeper understanding of the intricate relationship between various elements. They have no plans to stop the whole process for another 150 years. Who knows what else they'll find? You see, Göbekli Tepe has been labeled purely as a ritual site with no signs of domestic activities. We were led to believe that the absence of water meant it couldn't support semi-sedentary communities. But scientists believe it's time to shake things up and approach Göbekli Tepe with fresh eyes. It's time to question what we believed before and use new evidence and different ways of thinking. Like, there might have been a group of people living in the area who didn't stay in one place all the time. They moved around a bit but still had their own civilization, living in the area semi-sedentarily. Göbekli Tepe is not just home to a single temple, but an astounding collection of over 20 ancient structures. As archaeologists delve into the depths of this wonder, they are unraveling its unique layout, featuring two prominent focal points at the heart of each establishment, complemented by smaller structures and dividing walls. What's even crazier is that in this area, there are over 200 obelisks, which are narrow tapering monuments.
Archaeologists have been studying Petra in Jordan for 200 years, and in 2024, they found something they had never seen before. It's a tomb with at least 12 complete human skeletons and artifacts that are over 2,000 years old right in front of the treasury. Bronze, iron, and ceramic items were placed with the deceased, which shows how people honored their loved ones when they passed away. It's a rare chance for scientists to learn more about the Nabateans, an ancient group of Arabian nomads who built Petra. The objects found in the tomb under Petra's treasury are in amazing condition, but the skeletons became fragile because it's damp inside the tomb. They plan to study the remains and extract DNA to see if the people in the tomb were related. While some scientists are solving tomb mysteries, others have trained AI to find new ancient sites for them. They've created an algorithm that works with a special type of satellite imagery. This technique uses radio waves that can peek under things like sand, soil, and even ice to find hidden objects. AI will help search a huge desert on the Arabian Peninsula called the Empty Quarter for archaeological treasures. The lead scientists of the experiment trained the algorithm to recognize hidden locations using data from a site they had found before. The new tech can discover buried structures within 20 inches, which is very precise. Another groundbreaking tech, LiDAR, which means light detection and ranging, helped archaeologists reveal new hidden cities all around the world. LiDAR can see big structures beneath layers of vegetation and map even subtle changes in ancient landscapes. They use it to scan large areas from a small plane flying over places that aren't so easy to study from the ground, like dense jungle. In 2024 alone, they found new Maya settlements in southern Mexico, gardens, roads, and rivers in Ecuador's Amazon rainforest, ancient ruins on the Pacific island of Tonga, and the remains of 2 medieval cities along the Silk Road route in Uzbekistan. Maybe some smart technology can also explain what Marge Simpson is doing on Earth in an ancient Egyptian tomb from 3,000 years ago. The drawing, featuring a woman with yellow-colored skin, a blue crown, and a green outfit, is alarmingly like the famous cartoon character. If you don't see a resemblance here, I hope you'll at least enjoy an amazingly well-preserved necklace with amethyst and agate beads. It's from another recent find from Egypt, an ancient tomb with 11 sealed burials near Luxor. Archaeologists also found 2 copper mirrors, one with a lotus-shaped handle and the second with a unique design of the deity of the sky, women, fertility, and love in ancient Egypt. The hair of the figurine was originally made from almost 4,000 mud beads. Another awesome find from 2024 is an ancient Greek shrine with intact burials, a sarcophagus, and plenty of gold inside. They think it was built before the year 300 before the Common Era, and the marble lions, also found inside, were made from the same marble as the Parthenon in Athens. Greece is so full of ancient treasures that the city of Thessaloniki will house around 300,000 of those artifacts in their new subway system. Meanwhile, archaeologists in France have found a monument unlike any other, and they can't figure out what it was used for. It's direct proof that people used to live here between the Neolithic and the early Iron Age periods. The coolest part is a monument made of 3 unique shapes that fit together like puzzle pieces. Some gravel found in the monument could mean there used to be a wooden fence called a palisade. People who built it probably used it for protection or decoration. The team studied the layers of soil around the monument to learn more about its origins. The only tools found so far were sharp flint stones, not the cartoon characters, which were used during the Neolithic period. The next step will be radiocarbon dating to figure out exactly how old the site is. Now, the oldest saddle ever found so far was found in the grave of a woman near the edge of the Taklamakan Desert in northwest China. This saddle is the oldest ever discovered. It was crafted from pieces of leather that were sewn together and stuffed with straw and animal hair to make it soft. Now, normally, things made from natural materials like this don't last very long because they rot or fall apart. But the Taklamakan Desert is so dry that it helped preserve the artifact. The herdswoman who used the saddle was buried in her full riding attire, so this proves that not only men used saddles and took part in herding and traveling. Now let's shift to Guatemala, where an ornate jade mask made by the ancient Maya people was waiting for centuries to be discovered. Scientists use radiocarbon dating to figure out the age of the mask. They believe the mask may represent a Maya storm deity, a powerful figure in their mythology. These kinds of masks were often made to honor Maya royalty, and they were placed in the tombs of kings and queens when they were buried. The king's tomb was also decorated with carvings made using tools crafted from volcanic obsidian. After 15 years of searching, scientists may have finally figured out where the altar stone of Stonehenge comes from. They compared the tiny minerals inside the altar stone with rocks from many places in Wales and England and ruled out lots of spots. Then they found the perfect match with a place in Scotland, more than 466 miles away from Stonehenge. This area might even be Orkney, a group of islands in the far northeast of Scotland where a lot was going on during the Neolithic period. The big question now is how ancient people moved such a massive stone so far. The altar stone is over 16 feet long and weighs more than 6 tons. The new theory is that they might have used boats to carry it across the coastline and rivers. Once it was close to Stonehenge, they theoretically dragged it across the land using wooden sleds, ropes, and a lot of teamwork. Meanwhile, in the north of France, an ancient home popped to the surface during the construction of a new house. It turned out to be a luxury urban house for the elite from the 2nd century of the Common Era. The inside of the house was destroyed by a fire, but under the destroyed layer, there are beautiful, real-size fresco paintings. Turkish archaeologists unearthed the arm and foot bones of elephants that lived around 9 million years ago. They also found fossils of early horses, giraffes, and even saber-toothed cats. They've already identified 43 distinct types of animals from this site and collected more than 4,000 fossils. One more cool find from Turkey is a 64,000-year-old workshop inside Enkaja Cave. It looks like people used it for 24,000 years non-stop. There are some tools inside, like flakes and blades, which were made inside the workshop. In eastern Turkey, a farmer accidentally found a 1,000-square-foot mosaic from the late Roman or early Byzantine period just beneath the dirt. Experts say it's a one-of-a-kind thing from this region, and it's still in one piece after all this time. The pattern shows dozens of trees, plants, and animals that were found in ancient Turkey. There could be more treasures in the area, so they plan to keep digging. Our final stop will be in Sicily, where archaeologists uncovered a huge ancient thermal complex. Inside, they found 2 rooms with floors covered in colorful mosaic designs, along with a large courtyard surrounded by arched wings. As they kept digging, they discovered more parts of the ancient city. They found new roads and the remains of a huge complex, along with stretches of old stone walls that were part of the city's fortifications. These discoveries are helping scientists imagine what the city might have looked like during ancient times. No one knows for sure whether the bathhouse was built by the Greeks or the Romans, since both civilizations lived in Sicily long ago. The unanswered mysteries surrounding ancient civilizations have been a source of inspiration for many conspiracy theorists. In fact, some of these mysteries are so interesting that many of us either already believe them or would like to. One thing is for sure though, none of those thousands of conspiracy theories have ever been, classified. Or have they? We're all aware that the CIA has done some questionable things throughout history for the sake of national security, but you wouldn't expect a book to be both a national and international threat. The CIA recently declassified parts of a book that talks about lost ancient civilizations and the catastrophic events that made them vanish thousands of years ago. This mysterious book was written in 1963 by a guy named Chan Thomas, and it was going to be published by Emerson House in 1965 until the CIA got involved. For some mysterious reason, they classified the book, and it was never released to the public until recently. But here's where it gets interesting. The book was declassified in 2013 due to the Freedom of Information Act, but it wasn't released to the public until 2016. And what was released truly raises a few questions. The original version of this document was 284 pages long, but the PDF essay that was released was heavily censored, with just 57 pages, which makes it 1/5 of the whole document. The pages were edited before they were released to the public in such a way that you wouldn't even notice that the other pages were missing. Now, no one really knows why this book was classified in the first place, but it has some interesting content from what I've gathered. The author of the book had quite the imagination and a huge love for ancient civilizations. And even though what he had to say is very thought-provoking, some of it is just bizarre. He believes that our planet is locked into a never-ending cycle of pole shifts and Earth crust displacements that are responsible for the mass extinctions of many civilizations which existed more than 6,000 years ago, even before the Sumerians. He believed that these events caused more damage to the Earth than meteors, and he bases this theory on a few artifacts that exist around the world, but weren't really noticed until recently. But I'll get into that in a bit. Those mass extinctions that the book talks about include the end of the Ice Age, when huge 2-mile-thick ice sheets disappeared from northern Europe, Northern America, and Canada, and caused 100 species to go extinct. And here's how the author illustrates his hypothesis. He believes that there was a geomagnetic pole shift which caused catastrophic changes to both the atmosphere and the Earth's crust, resulting in the extinction of many civilizations over time. Now, even though the geomagnetic pole shift is a real thing, it doesn't just happen overnight. It happens really slowly, only about every few 100,000 years, according to scientists. But it's a bit more complicated than it sounds. It is a well-known fact that the North Pole is somewhere above Alaska, and the South Pole is close to the middle of Antarctica. Now, these are the geographic poles, and they'll always be north and south. However, the Earth's magnetic poles flipped a few 100,000 years ago. So if you had a compass, let's say 700,000 years ago, it would instead point south and show you the Antarctic. But the author of the book has a different theory. He believed that the flip of the north and south magnetic poles doesn't happen every few 100,000 years, but every 12,000 years, and that this flip occurs in just a few hours, causing a catastrophic apocalypse. He thinks this happens as a result of an explosion inside the Earth's core. This explosion causes the magnetic poles to flip, but it also causes the Earth's crust to move. According to the book, due to these catastrophic events, a lot of the Earth's continents that were submerged underwater rose above sea level in just a few hours. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The author also states that the Peruvian Andes were beneath the ocean before the last pole shift. And even though it seems far-fetched, since the Andes are approximately 22,000 feet above sea level, there was evidence to support that claim in the late 80s. Scientists found whale bones and fossils that are said to be millions of years old on top of the Andes and the Himalayan mountains. It's also suggested in the book that the deep freeze the Earth went through during the Younger Dryas event caused the Gulf Stream to be disrupted. And he points to some interesting evidence to support that theory. Frozen mammoths were found trapped in blocks of ice with food still in their mouths. Now, this is a true mystery, because freezing cold weather is in their nature, and they were among the few animals that could truly survive in the Ice Age. So, what could have caused them to freeze so quickly? Kinda makes you go, doesn't it? The document describes the Great Pyramid of Giza as a true enigma as well. The Pyramid of Giza is made out of 2.5 million stone blocks that are placed on top of each other with great precision. It's close to 750 feet wide and more than 450 feet high. To this day, we're still not able to explain how it was constructed, and it's quite difficult to understand the internal design as well. On the inside, the pyramid has no similarities to the other pyramids, and, despite popular belief, there were no mummies found in any of them. If you think that's a bit weird, wait for the next one. There are absolutely no hieroglyphs found in any of the pyramids, and that goes both ways. What do I mean? There are also no pyramids, or anything that resembles a pyramid, in any hieroglyphs either. Mr. Thomas believes that the pyramids were created hundreds of thousands of years before the Egyptians by a civilization that went extinct. Speaking of civilizations, in his book he even mentions the Greeks. He claims that in Greece, there was another ancient race of people that went extinct as well. He claims they were extremely tall with blue eyes and blonde hair, and had access to advanced technology that the Greeks couldn't have known about in their prime. Now, before we drift too far away from the stone blocks, let's talk about another mystery, the temple in Baalbek, Lebanon. and its ginormous foundation blocks. Those stones, which make up the Heliopolis, were also used for the temple in Rome. The foundations of the temples are made of 900-ton trilithon stones, and according to the author, this is proof that there must have been a lost ancient civilization with advanced technology. Now, most archaeologists claim that those stones were made by the Romans. However, there's no evidence to support that. The Romans didn't have the technological equipment to make the stones or lift them. So, you might think, what if they just made them in that place right then and there? Well, those stones were also lifted 30 feet high and were placed next to each other with mathematical precision. And let's not forget about the blocks on top of the Heliopolis in Lebanon, which weigh about 800 tons each. But wait till you hear the next one. The Romans don't even credit themselves for these stones. They claim that they built up the sides, but they don't take credit for the extraordinarily large and heavy foundation stones. The author also makes an interesting point about the distance between the Roman capital and Baalbek in Lebanon. Why would the Romans build the world's largest monolithic stones in such a remote area, and so far away from their capital, and never take credit for it? Well, folks, it's a mystery to me. Now, let's move on to the most intriguing enigma, Easter Island, which is located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, or nowhere, if you will. The author questions how people found it or even settled in such a remote island that long ago. One of the signifiers of Easter Island are the Moai statues, and the mystery surrounding who they depict and why. What's an even bigger question is how they were created, moved, and positioned in the places they were found. According to this declassified document, Easter Island was part of the now lost continent named Mu, and it was sunk in the Pacific Ocean in a disastrous cataclysm that happened during one of those pole shifts. The continent of Mu, according to the book, was as big as South America, and what we now call Easter Island is just what's left of that continent. The author also believes that this is what happened with the lost city of Atlantis as well. Plato is even quoted about this, saying that the whole city of Atlantis sunk miles beneath the waves within just a day. Even though the whole story sounds very intriguing and makes some interesting points, we know that, scientifically speaking, a cataclysmic pole shift causing entire civilizations to go extinct isn't possible. Now, let's assume that another species, whether humanoid or dolphin-like, could have existed millions of years ago. How do we find their traces? There was a Doctor Who episode about a non-human industrial civilization on Earth that existed long before us. These reptiles, called Silurians, were forced deep underground by a catastrophic rise of temperatures on Earth, and there they thrived for centuries. That inspired scientists to create the so-called Silurian hypothesis. If there was an advanced civilization before us, we should find their traces somewhere. Well, let's try. Climatologist Gavin Schmidt and astrophysicist Adam Frank decided to dive into this themselves. Like us, any technologically advanced civilization would be hungry for energy, so they looked for global effects that would leave a widespread mark. For example, hints of large-scale industrial processes, like plants and factories, and their leftovers. Then comes the question of how long these civilizations would last. If they existed for a long time, we should look for long-lasting signs, like residues from burning fossil fuels, mass extinctions, synthetic chemicals not found in nature, and even traces of nuclear fission. Basically, we should search for the same kinds of things that humans are currently leaving behind as evidence of our activities. Unfortunately, this evidence isn't that easy to find. Let's imagine an unsettling scenario if humanity suddenly disappeared. Even though it seems like we've left a lot of changes on our planet, the future civilization millions of years from now would struggle to find any remnants of our existence. Why? Well, our planet has existed for 4.5 billion years. Complex life on Earth has existed for more than 400 million years. Compared to that, our industrial period only lasted around 300 years, and we haven't left any significant traces. Our record of Earth's history is full of gaps, especially the further back you look. The fossil record captures only some things, being very selective and incomplete. On average, one fossil emerges every 10,000 years, and dinosaur footprints are even rarer. Mountains rise, oceans change, and plate tectonics can easily wipe out evidence of entire civilizations. After a couple of million years, chances are any physical signs of a civilization would disappear. In order to find at least something, we have to look for things like odd sediment patterns or unusual isotopic ratios. Also, fossils mostly form in water, leaving us in the dark about creatures on land or in the jungles. So even if there was a technologically advanced society millions of years in the past, and even if they were far more advanced than us, we might struggle to find any clues of its existence. Frank and Schmidt try to understand how we could ever hope to spot signs of them. Discovering actual cities would be the ultimate proof of a Silurian-style civilization on Earth. But Adam Frank isn't too optimistic. Even now, our cities cover less than 3% of the surface, making it easy to miss ancient city ruins. Whether a city survives over tens of millions of years depends on whether the land around it is sinking, getting locked into a rock, or rising, getting worn away by rain and wind. So, places like the French Quarter in New Orleans might have a better shot of making it into the geologic record than, say, Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. When it comes to finding artifacts, the odds are pretty slim as well. No prehistoric iPhone would survive millions of years, fancy glass or not. Finding their fossilized remnants might be a bit more promising, but it's still tricky. Considering modern humans have only been around for about 100,000 years, it's quite possible that we might overlook any traces of an earlier advanced species. There is one thing, though. We could stumble upon their traces in rocks. Our current chaotic era might leave a distinct mark on the Earth's geological history, especially since we're basically experiencing PTM 2.0. I'll get to that in a moment. So they try to look at the changes in the carbon cycle. Humans have been releasing a lot of fossil carbon since the 18th century. This leaves a special mark in the carbon isotope ratio, like a signature that shows the difference between carbon in living things, such as seashells, and carbon in lifeless volcanic rock. Scientists also look for signs in the way sediments are arranged. Large coastal deltas might mean that there were bigger rivers made by folks in this hypothetical civilization. Traces of nitrogen could suggest big-scale farming, where they used a lot of fertilizer. Spikes in metal levels in the sediment could mean runoff from heavy industries. Of course, a single find like that wouldn't tell us anything. Schmidt says the key is to look for multiple signs together. Without clear artifacts, the uniqueness of an event might show in various clues rather than a set of changes linked to a single cause. On a quest for Silurian-style clues, scientists even decided to check the Moon. Some astronomers find it surprising that no one has looked into this before. They even joked about the possibility of dinosaurs building rockets and leaving traces on the Moon or other celestial bodies. These astronomers think that Earth-like planets tend to erase signs of civilizations on their surfaces. So they're exploring the wild notion that these beings might have been space travelers. In that case, remnants of their technology, known as technosignatures, could be lurking not only on our Moon, but also on asteroids, or even buried on Mars. There they might endure for millions or even billions of years. Unfortunately, so far, despite digging into the past 380 million years and examining all suspicious events, the researchers haven't found a clear match for a technological civilization. They don't give up, though. Frank calls for more investigation. For example, we could study how modern industrial chemicals stick around in ocean sediments. This, he believes, could help us identify similar chemical traces in the Earth's history. If there are no traces, why do we even bother to find something like that? This research is based on Schmidt and Frank's recent papers. They were delving into the Anthropocene. It's the proposed epoch dominated by human activities on Earth. It's full of these things called hyperthermals. They're prehistoric events when temperatures on Earth sharply increased over a relatively short time. They're like extreme heat waves from the past. A great example of this is the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PETM for short. It happened around 55.5 million years ago,  'em, and saw a rapid rise in global temperatures. Over 200,000 years, the average temperature on Earth jumped from about 9 to 14 degrees Fahrenheit. We study these hyperthermals to understand how they occurred, from natural causes or human activities. So, these hyperthermals sparked the genesis of Frank and Schmidt's research. To study them, scientists started examining chemical signals and tracers left in rocks. When doing that, Schmidt and Frank uncovered some eerie parallels between all the climate issues we have today and past periods of rapid temperature shifts. There's a close similarity between the PETM and other hyperthermal events. So all this work isn't just about solving a historical mystery. Understanding our impact on the environment can guide us to finding better ways to live in harmony with the planet and avoid becoming a forgotten species in the future. Our Milky Way is filled with lots of planets that could be just right for life, but we don't know if there are other civilizations out there. Earth is the only place we know of with living beings. About 200 years ago, people wondered if there might be civilizations on Mars. Back then, it was a real question. But once we got pictures from space probes, we decided there wasn't any evidence for it, and that idea got stuck in our minds. Now, it's not even considered a valid topic for serious science. It's seen as kind of silly. But no one has set clear limits on what could have happened on our own planet a really long time ago. So, even if there is no proof, we shouldn't throw away the possibility. Don't forget, it took humanity a while to recognize dinosaurs. Maybe Silurians are just patiently waiting for their time.
Strange and amazing items are discovered often, but figuring out what our ancestors were up to is pretty tough. Especially when all you have are just some rusty cups and cave drawings. It's no surprise that even the experts in lab coats sometimes make mistakes. But it's not just about dusty plates and huge stones. Sometimes there's even humans with large heads. So grab your digging tools and let's travel back to ancient times to explore incredible societies that even scientists can't fully explain. Sardinia may look idyllic now, but I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't fancy visiting it 3,000 years ago. Rumor has it, terrible giants roamed around this island back then. People even talk about finding human skeletons over 13 feet tall there, although nobody's ever shown anything to prove it. But the stories will make you wonder because some weird stuff has definitely happened. In 1974, over 5,000 pieces of broken stone artifacts were found in a part of the island called Monte Prama, but instead of being displayed in a museum, they were locked up in an underground vault for about 30 years. Sounds a bit suspicious, doesn't it? When they were finally displaced in 2005, scientists put the pieces together to find statues of 38 giant men standing 8 feet tall. Not quite as tall as the legendary skeletons, but still pretty huge. It's thought these statues were made by the Nuragic people, who lived on the island a long time ago. Besides giant statues, they also built over 8,000 massive stone buildings. Perhaps Nuragic weren't giants themselves, but they definitely liked their things big. I do too. I like a big number of likes on our videos, that would be pretty great. Thank you if you liked this and subscribed. Now back to the video. You and I are pretty smart, but we might not be the smartest humans ever. Actually, we might not even be the smartest species. Since 1913, some skull fossils found in South Africa have hinted at a possibly smarter contender called Boskop Man. This human-like species might have lived as recently as 10,000 years ago. Their skull suggests they had really big heads, which means their brains could have been 30% bigger than ours. Wow! Their average IQ could have been around 149, making them among the smartest 0.05% of people today. But if a Boskop Brainiac was so much smarter, why are they not around and we are? Well, bigger isn't always better, you know. Our brains are a lot bigger than our ape relatives, mainly in the prefrontal cortex. This part helps with high-level tasks like making decisions, remembering things short-term, and being aware of ourselves. The parts of the brain that handle our senses and movements haven't really grown much. So, maybe the Boskops spent too much time dwelling on the past rather than doing practical things like hunting. But this is all just guessing.
We really don't know what happened to these clever cousins of ours. Some people even argue that Boskops weren't any different from us, with the only evidence being parts of skulls. The jungle is huge. Did you know the Amazon rainforest is home to about 30% of all the world's plant and animal species? That's impressive. However, the history of one native species, humans, has long puzzled scientists. The mysterious Kasarabe people lived here for hundreds of years and then vanished around 1400 AD. People thought the Amazon only had a few scattered tribes, but recently we discovered big, unusual shapes in the ground called geoglyphs. These might look like simple shallow ditches, but they're actually the remains of a vast civilization that spread over 5,000 square miles and includes about 450 markings, some as wide as 1,300 feet. That's insane! They likely contained ceremonial buildings and could have hosted up to 1 million people as recently as 550 years ago. Thanks to new technology like LiDAR, which uses a safe laser to map the forest without harming it, we can explore deeper. In 2019, some scans showed miles of raised roads and pathways and even pyramids over 70 feet tall. They found 26 separate settlements, 2 of which were at least 250 acres each. Damn, that's like 330 soccer fields. It's not certain what happened to the Kasarabe people. Maybe European conquistadors drove them out. Maybe the most baffling ancient civilization is one we've never actually found a trace of. Yep, I'm talking about Atlantis, the grand city that supposedly sank into the ocean. The first mentions of Atlantis come from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who talked about a great city near the Strait of Gibraltar. But for ages, everyone just thought Plato made up Atlantis as a perfect version of his own Athens. So why, about 12,000 years after it supposedly vanished, do we still wonder if it might be real? Well, in the 19th century, U.S. Congressman Ignatius Donnelly wrote a book giving 13 reasons why he thought Atlantis was more than just a myth. Then, in 1965, some folks thought they actually found Atlantis when they discovered the reshaped structure, a massive 25-mile-wide dome in Mauritania, Africa. It's so big that you can see the whole thing from space. 2 astronauts flying over the Sahara Desert spotted this giant eye staring back at them and thought they'd made the discovery of a lifetime. Unfortunately, there's no solid evidence linking this structure to Atlantis. It's believed to have formed from volcanic activity about 100 million years ago. But it does look suspicious, doesn't it? Still, we're no closer to knowing the truth. Imagine going back to about 3,300 BCE and finding yourself in South Asia. Welcome to the Harappan civilization. These people were way ahead of their time. They had cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, complete with baked brick houses, sophisticated drainage systems, and even public baths. This place might have had over 5 million people, making it one of the densest regions at the time. They also invented a system of standardized weights that was incredibly useful for traders. And trading they did. These people had connections stretching all the way to the Middle East, thanks to their great skills in metallurgy. They even had a form of ancient branding. The seals were used to stamp clay on trade goods. Despite being so advanced with a thriving urban life, there's a whole bunch of mystery shrouding their language and script. We've got bits and pieces of their writing, but no one's deciphered them yet, even with all the technology we have today. We also still don't know how exactly their society worked. It looks like they didn't flaunt their social status as much as other civilizations. No grand palaces or massive monuments. Instead, their largest buildings might have been granaries. They sure were practical. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Around 1800 BCE, this bustling civilization started to decline, possibly due to shifts in river patterns. As the environment changed, the Harappans packed up, moving towards more hospitable lands. Ever heard of the Minotaur? The beast with a bull's head and a man's body, hunting the bravest travelers in a massive maze. Well, this wasn't just any old tale. It was one of the most popular dramas of the ancient world, and it was inspired by this place, the island of Crete. The Minoans lived here during the Bronze Age. They had stunning palaces, amazing frescoes, and a culture so rich it still fascinates historians to this day. They built places like Knossos, which was so complex with its multi-story buildings and elaborate hallways that it might have inspired the whole labyrinth myth. Their engineering was so ahead of its time that even their drainage systems were more advanced than what many of us have today. Let me know in the comments which of these stories you find the most fascinating, and thanks for watching.
Now, we wouldn't call this island mystical unless there were tales of giants living here. The island of Gozo in Malta is the backdrop of an ancient legend. Malta is an island country located in the Mediterranean Sea, just south of Europe. It's a very strategically located archipelago. Throughout history, it was ruled by many different societies, such as the Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, and Carthaginians. One cold night, thousands of years ago, a farmer noticed the sky turn orange, then red, when he heard a loud thump. Although the ground seemed to be moving, this wasn't an earthquake. When he looked toward the woods, he saw a giant silhouette, taller than the trees. As he fearfully approached, he realized it was a woman, a giant woman. She introduced herself as Sansuna. Unlike the terrible giants of many tales, Sansuna didn't want to exterminate the human race. She was loving and caring. She told the farmer that she and her people could help protect their land from invaders. The locals were pretty interested in this offer. Since Malta is located in an important commercial route, it was constantly being invaded. The story says that Sansuna settled in Malta, and sooner rather than later, she was moving things around. And when I say things, I mean monoliths. Sansuna carried huge stones on her shoulder to build a magnificent temple called Gigantia, which means place of giants. She even did this while holding her half-giant, half-human kid on the other shoulder. Some say Sansuna lived exclusively on beans and honey, although others replace honey with water. The funniest bit here is that Malta is the 10th smallest country in the world, but it somehow managed to host giants. Hey, go figure. The temple looked like a giant game of Tetris, with some stones weighing as much as 20 elephants. Some of these monolithic rocks are so heavy, scholars guess it would take 50 men working together to lift just one stone. Now, as much as this is entertaining, humans never proved giants were real, so this story couldn't be true. There's a brief mention of a species of giants called the Nephilim in some ancient texts. The Nephilims would have been terrible giants that wreaked havoc on the earth and only survived until the Great Flood. But nobody ever found real proof of this species really existing on Earth, until this came along. The world of Maltese archaeology unearthed quite a few shocking things in the past years. One of them are known as the hypogeum skulls. Hypogeum is the Greek word for underground, and this incredible site was discovered in the first decade of the 20th century. Back then, Malta's National Museum director received an important phone call. Someone had accidentally dug some impressive bones and asked him to come check it out. The hypogeum looked like an underground city, filled with mazes and rooms that stretched along multiple floors. They were all made with similar limestones as the Maltese temples above ground. The hypogeum was filled with important relics and artifacts. Scientists quickly understood that the hypogeum was built as a type of final resting place for locals. So, along with skulls, they found a lot of bones and skeletons. One of these artifacts were skulls, but these weren't regular human skulls. Rather, they were of the elongated type. To make matters worse, these skulls were hidden from the public for years. People started to talk and created a bunch of theories behind it. The truth is that this discovery was a turning point for Maltese archaeology, although scientists didn't know what to do with it. Some wondered if these skulls were natural or manipulated, since they knew some cultures in the world used head binds to alter their skulls. Other scientists threw in the hypothesis of little gray people or even the legendary giants. Some say that the elongated skulls could have been sculptures that worshipped otherworldly deities. There was no way to confirm any of these theories, so the question remained: Who were the builders of Malta's megalithic temples? Now, let's take a look at what scientists know. The Maltese megalithic temples have been standing strong since 3500 BCE, which is even older than the pyramids of Egypt. The main dilemma here is that these temples were built even before we invented writing, yet they required advanced technological skills to exist. The Gigantea Temple seems too absurd to have been built by humans. The South Temple has a corridor with 4 oval rooms on the sides, looking like a big shamrock leaf. In one of these rooms, scientists found altars decorated with spiral patterns. It looked like an altar of some sort, indicating early Maltese people used them for ritualistic purposes. The North Temple is similar but smaller, with a very low entrance that makes people crouch down to get inside. You get it? You need to bow down to their deities in order to get into this sacred place. I mean, one can't help but wonder about the secret reasons these ancient builders had to build such a huge temple. I'm thinking they probably cast one of Daenerys' dragons to move the monoliths around. Yeah, I'm joking here. But hey, remember the entrance to King's Landing? Yup, the series used the Medina Gates in Malta as the exterior of King's Landing during Episode 3 of Season 1. Anyways, back to the giants. The ritualistic theory of the whole thing won a few points when archaeologists uncovered these mysterious figures. They're popularly known as fat ladies. These tiny statues have round bodies and faces that show how much they enjoyed life. They kind of look like a miniature Sunsana, the giantess we talked about. Scientists believe these were statues that celebrated well-being and prosperity. It does prove that the people of the time had advanced craftsmanship skills, and they were pretty intentional with their constructions and art manifestations. One of these statues is known as the Sleeping Lady. This Neolithic piece of art depicts the figure of a large woman lying on her side sleeping. After studying it deeper, scientists guessed this statue was meant to represent the Great Reaper. It was found in the hypogeum, which we now know is a huge resting place. This specific statue is different from all the other fat ladies, starting with the hair and the embroidered skirt. Then there's this statue. This is supposed to represent an 8-foot-tall woman and the rim of her skirt. She was discovered in the most unusual of ways. A farmer was trying to plow his field, but he kept hitting large blocks of stone. All the way back in 1915, the farmer called Malta's National Museum director and asked him to come check it out. Some think this is all the proof you need to confirm that Sunsana was real. Others aren't all that sure. But that's not all. The place where this giant statue was buried revealed one of Malta's most impressive archaeological sites, the Tarsian temples. The temples were made from limestone blocks. Some are 20 feet tall and weigh around 20 tons. Zamet, the museum director, kept digging and discovered multiple sites made of megalithic stones. All of them supposedly built by Stone Age farmers, all stranded on a remote island in the Mediterranean Sea thousands of years ago. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, look at these temples in Manidra. This is probably the world's earliest calendar. On the equinoxes, the sun passes directly through the main doorway, straight down the central axis. On the solstices, there are 2 superb variations. During the summer solstice, the rays fall on the edge of the megalith to the left of the doorway, and during the winter, the rays fall to the right side of the doorway. It's astronomical precision at its finest. And what about the structures in the Hall Tarsian that we've already talked about? This complex is the oldest one in all of Malta. It was built with the purpose of doing animal offerings to deities. Scientists confirm this by unearthing numerous animal bones buried in the soil. They also found a great collection of spirals, indicating that the locals also used this temple for ritualistic purposes. Overall, there are 7 megalithic temples in Malta, each more impressive than the other. Scholars keep on digging to see if they can uncover the truth, much like researchers do with the pyramids of Egypt, the lost Mayan cities in the Americas, and other sites. Take a look at these stones. They seem ordinary at first glance, just ancient slabs, ruins of some buildings. However, unlike many other archaeological finds, this one is among the most mysterious and unique. Here's why. These stones are the remains of a large temple complex called Puma Punku, located in Bolivia. Scientists aren't certain, but it's likely that Puma Punku was built by the Tiahuanaco Empire, which existed between 300 and 1000 CE, before the Inca Empire. There is no information suggesting that this civilization had advanced building technologies. Moreover, they might not have even had a writing system. Every stone was carved and polished with astonishing precision. They fit together perfectly, like pieces of a puzzle. The craft is so refined that not even a razor blade can pass between the stones. Quite impressive for people who lived around 1500 years ago. And these stones are heavy. The largest ones weighed around 130 tons. So, how did the builders transport such weight from one place to another? Scientists suggest that this civilization did not know about the invention of the wheel. So, how did they manage to build such a perfect engineering structure? Did Tiahuanaco have the knowledge and tools for stonework? Or did someone else build Puma Punku? There are several theories about this. Theory 1. There was some advanced civilization that came to South America, interacted with Tiahuanaco, built this engineering marvel, and then left. Theory 2. Some beings from another planet came to Earth, showed humans how to build perfect structures, and created Puma Punku. This theory is dubious. Another idea from this series suggests that Puma Punku was built by mythological creatures from the South American culture at that time. Theory 3, the most likely one. There is no mystery here. Tiahuanaco was indeed an advanced civilization with incredible building technologies. So, what do you think? Okay, we've seen some pretty rectangular stones used for building a temple. How about perfectly round stones for studying the starry sky? Or for some other purpose, it doesn't matter. So, welcome to Costa Rica. In the south of this country lies the so-called dicaspheres. These are large, heavy, round stones created in the pre-Columbian era, around 600 CE. Now, each stone is made from a unique type of rock formed from cooled magma. In other words, someone waited for a volcanic eruption to end and for all the magma to cool, and then took all this material and carved these spheres from it. But how did they achieve such a perfect shape? Scientists suggest that people used small stones to grind and carve the cooled magma. Some specialists think that the stones were made for navigation. They could have indicated the way to certain places. Another theory claims that the Dica squares were used for astronomy. No one knows for sure. We may never get the answer to this question because the people who knew the secret of the stones disappeared after the Spanish expansion. So, let's continue our journey. See these cobblestones? Archaeologists still don't know why they're arranged along a long stretch of desert crossing Jordan and Israel. These strange stones form a chain of lines 40 miles long and have been here since around 300 BCE. Because they were discovered by pilots during flights about 100 years ago, some call these stones kites. One of the more popular theories suggests that people placed these structures here to lure animals into a pit where they could be caught. Apparently, ancient hunters knew the behavior of local fauna well, and were sure the animals would somehow walk along these stones, ending up in an open area with a pit where hunters could easily do their work. Perfectly smooth rectangular and square stones, round stones, stone traps for animals. What's next? How about a stone canvas or stone painting? To see this ancient artifact, we'll travel to Glasgow, Scotland, where archaeologists unearthed a stone slab created about 5,000 years ago. It is called the Cockno Stone. The slab measures 43 by 26 feet, about half a basketball court. And this entire area is filled with strange swirling patterns that scientists call cup and ring marks. But what do they mean? As usual, scientists don't know for sure. But one theory suggests that the inscriptions on the stone are somehow related to astronomical phenomena, such as lunar or solar eclipses. Maybe it was a star map, or maybe people just wanted to create a work of art. In any case, there is another interesting fact related to the cup and ring marks. Scientists have found similar drawings in other prehistoric sites around the world. Okay, let's step away from mysterious stones and look at some other archaeological mysteries. Here is the approximate order of civilization development starting from 8000 BCE, according to scientists. First, people settle in one place and build a city or settlement there. Then they engage in agriculture, and after that, they build temples. But in 1994, archaeologists said, no, the order might have been different. What if people first built temples to worship higher mythical beings and only then built cities and engaged in agriculture? Let's go to Turkey, to the rural area of Göbekli Tepe, where in the mid-1990s, archaeologists discovered several stone pillars with carved animals on them. This ancient structure dates back to around the 10th millennium BCE. Now, this place is considered one of the oldest places of worship in the world. Most likely, it was built by semi-nomadic hunters who knew nothing about agriculture because it appeared in this region 5 centuries later. Now, scientists are wondering, is it true that such structures led to the settlement of the area? The answer to this question may help understand the mindset and development of humanity in many parts of our planet. So, would you like a scroll with the location of a treasure marked on it? You could say you already have one. Check it out yourself. Just Google the Copper Scroll Treasure. Download a high-resolution photo of the scroll and follow the instructions. Oops! The instructions are written in an incomprehensible language. Scientists have been trying to decipher this message since the scroll was discovered in 1952 in Qumran, and the answer is still not found. According to one theory, the scroll contains information about a large amount of silver and gold. But even if the treasure does not exist, this artifact is still quite interesting to study. It was created around 2,000 years ago, during the time when the Roman Empire ruled over the settlement of Qumran. Perhaps the local residents hid their valuables from the Roman legionnaires and left such a map for their descendants. When you approach this archaeological wonder, you won't notice anything. But if you rise into the air and look down at the ground, you'll see amazing patterns created by the people of the Nazca culture. This discovery is called the Nazca Lines. Pilots and passengers of commercial aircraft first noticed them in the 1920s and 30s during flights over Peru. These large drawings consist of geometric lines, complex images of animals, and whimsical figures. More than 2,000 years ago, people removed part of the surface soil of this land and created these patterns. But why? The Nazca Lines continue to captivate researchers and enthusiasts alike. Recent technological advancements, such as drone imagery and satellite mapping, have provided new insights into these enigmatic formations. Some researchers are now exploring the possibility that the lines serve multiple purposes, including communication with someone not from our world. And to some extent, this is true. Some scientists believe that the Nazca Lines were a ritual method for communicating with the deities of the Nazca civilization. Studying these archaeological wonders not only enriches our knowledge of the past, but also inspires us to appreciate the ingenuity and creativity of the human spirit.